The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15 on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Again, it's repeated Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. Or parents out there that are having trouble with the DHS, loss of your children, and abuse reports written against you, we're here to give you some thoughts that we've gained over 20 years. My number is 515-276-3956, and John's number is 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and I want to say welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa, and it's those issues that we dwell on as our mission. Number one, to influence public policy, and number two, to assist people who are having difficulties with the Department of Human Services with respect to your family. And there are a number of things that are impacting that situation. We're going to hear a part of a program. We aren't able to schedule the entire 65 minutes within our time constraints, but we are going to hear from a speaker who's going to be talking about some of the elements of education. He is speaking to a homeschool group and speaking about education from a completely different perspective than we normally think. We think of education as cramming down into the minds the special academic subjects, but he speaks of a whole lot broader character of training children as they are brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. The speaker's name is Kevin Swanson, and he speaks to homeschool groups and attempts to assist in helping people understand really why they are homeschooling. Homeschooling has become a tremendous movement in this country where parents who have the sole authority and should be training their own children are coming back to that fundamental responsibility and doing it themselves. And of course, they're facing some criticism as that happens. You know, I mentioned that there are a lot of things that are impacting this whole idea of protecting children. One of those things that's impacting terribly seriously is when a family is taken to court or when a family is even dealt with the Department of Human Services. Something called perjury, something called dirty tricks, prosecutorial tricks. One name stands out in the news across this nation, and the name is Nifong. Nifong was a prosecutor who prosecuted some athletes recently for rape, and he knew what justice meant. He knew what his job was to promote justice, but for some reason prosecutors and social workers and others have got this idea that they have to win every case. And prosecutors know that their job is not to win, their job is to do justice. And if justice requires that they bring home a win, so be it. But if justice demands that they look at a case and turn it around and actually form a team with the defense when they know that an improper prosecution is underway, That is their task, and that is why we hire them. That is why we put a lot of trust in the prosecutor's office. But now we're finding more and more. In fact, I'm hearing in many cases the word lying in court, or can I prosecute these people for perjury? And I have been somewhat lax in promoting that whole idea of prosecuting perjury because of the fact, or encouraging parents to push for prosecution of perjury, because it is so common now and it is overlooked by the authorities. It really isn't necessary anymore to tell the truth. I'm going to ask Don to read just a very brief story from Independence, Iowa. Uh, he read a more complete story last time with respect to a perjury charge against Buchanan, social worker. Uh, but this time he'll give just a brief overview of what happened in Independence, Iowa, when a social worker decided to lie. And this is so common. I'm surprised that they haven't stepped in on these cases. And I think there will come a time when the Nifong uh, revolution will come upon us, when we begin to realize that our public servants, when they step in the courtroom, had better tell the truth. When our social workers go into the courtroom, they'd better tell the truth. Nifong, all he did was lose his job um, because not only lying in court, but doing a lot of other um, devious activities, which would bring a win to him, but would uh, beat up on what we think of as justice. Don, would you read that very brief summary?
This is on the homeschool conference.
No, this is the this one right here.
Oh, that
Yeah,
gets even briefer, John.
that's what I was talking about.
Social worker charged with perjury.
Yeah.
Independence, Iowa. A Buchanan County social worker was charged last week with 3 counts of perjury for allegedly filing false child welfare reports to the court. Marie Muller, 39, of Cedar Falls, filed 3 reports between August 27th, 2004 and October 7th. John?
You see, what I'm speaking about here is that social workers can win their cases. They can find cases, bring in false information to the court, and the court has no other way of gathering information. The court can't go out and investigate cases. That's not the job of the court. The court has to rely on the integrity of the people who stand before the bar, who swear before the court that what they're saying is valid and is truthful. But Marie Mahler, who is a public servant uh, working for the Department of Human Services, decided that she was going to take a little bit different path. And I have a mother that is interested in telling a little more about that story because she is from Buchanan County, and we're hoping that when she reveals that story, she'll do it in front of our cameras so that you can have some idea. By the way, this social worker story that Don just read doesn't appear in the Des Moines Register. It appeared only in the Waterloo Courier. Isn't it strange that they're able to keep that kind of information under wraps? And the Department of Human Services says, well, it really isn't our fault, that these terrible things happen to families because the judge makes the decision. Well, the judge made the decision based upon the information that is given to the judge. If that information is invalid, then the ruling of the court will be invalid, won't it? Well, we read, Don, I think it was in October of 2006, of a prosecution taking place in Pennsylvania, where they found out that an organization was coming before the court and lying before the court. And so the organization is being investigated by the FBI because they were a federally funded organization lying before the court. Not a good idea to lie before the court. You also had an unrelated comment you wanted to make about someone else who's doing some lying, and that is somebody who would like to promote a 1 cent increase in sales tax to promote all kinds of events around central Iowa. Don?
There's going to be a time for you to go in to vote on July 10th, and I encourage you to do that. There's going to be very few people turn out to vote, and that's the reason why they pick that date, because they know you're not going to go out and vote. And so the people that do vote, it's going to be an automatic yes. They want you to vote yes if you do go out and vote. This paper here says vote no July 10th. Why vote no? This lowers my property tax. Let me read the paragraph that goes with it. Several companies around town have donated over $300,000 to try and raise your sales tax to pay for their property taxes. It was sold as a property tax reduction, and people around town are actually buying it. People don't believe the hype. Vote no. We are here to educate people on what is really going on. A 17% sales tax increase. This measure will increase your taxes. If you want more taxes, either don't go to the poll or go and vote yes if you want your taxes raised. This regressive tax hurts lower income families more. Why is this a 17% tax when they only talk about 1%? The total sales tax increase you pay would go from 6%. Yes, we're paying 6 now. It started out as 1 cent, didn't it, John?
2%.
2 cents? 2%?
That was a temporary tax back in Depression days.
Would go from 6% to 7%. If you don't do anything, or if you go and vote yes, it'll raise to 7%, according to what they tell you. This increase is represented mathematically by stating an increase of 16.67%. Anybody can round off a little bit? That you just call it 17%, John.
Okay.
That you're going to vote yes for.
So the
or vote no if you don't want to pay the extra percent.
Okay. Yeah, it's a harebrained scheme, but they'll come back time after time after time with their perverted stories about how good this will be for others. We've seen this happen before, and we've seen the lack of success of these things. So we're going to call on Don in just a moment to talk a little bit about what Kevin Swanson is raising in his talk that we're going to present in just a little bit. The name of the speaker is Kevin Swanson, and we'll have Don tell about some of the statistics that he has found and some of the changes that have taken place in the past decades. Starting with that first paragraph, Don, ideas are powerful.
Ideas are powerful things, and there is no more powerful war waged today than that which fights over the content and methodology by which children will be educated for the next generation. This is the core of the battle for values. This is where cultures stand or fall. In 1960, 6% of children were born without fathers. In 2006, 37% of children were born without fathers. In 1900, the average American non-immigrant had 4.0 children. In 2000, the average American non-immigrant has 1.7 children. In 1880, there was no lesbian activity in the Laura Ingalls Wilder one-room schoolhouse. In 2006, reports of lesbian activity is common in American high schools. And 70% of educated people under 35 years of age endorse homosexual marriage. In 2020, 95% of children were born without fathers. I think that's a misprint, isn't it, John?
It could be.
And it goes on. Let's see. In 2020, most public high schools included, that'd be, I'm not sure what year he's calculating here.
Mm-hmm.
Most public high schools included homosexual classes complete with laboratories in their sexual orientation classes. Where will your family be in 2020? I think he's referring to just in the last couple of years what I just read there. Now he's looking toward 2020. What's going to happen in 2020? The battles are fought and won in education. The battles are waged in education where the minds of the next generation are fitted with a worldview by a certain educational methodology and content. Ground zero for this battle is every homeschool conference in America that dares to take on the secular model of education espoused by Rousseau, Mann, Marx, Dewey, and others. Since the beginning of the home education movement, mostly moms appeared on the front lines of the battle, and a few dads, but this movement is so marginalized minority. This year, Christian home educators of Colorado's Family Conference attracted about 4,000 parents concerned about their children and willing to invest a few days to explore the best way to educate their children. They wanted to know the best form of education in both method and content. I thank God for the homeschooling movement and the brave leaders of this movement that understand the cultural battles and are willing to take on the battle of ideas where the conflict wages most hot. The state leaders and support group leaders that I have worked with this year in Iowa, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois, and Colorado are courageously gentle, humble, gracious, and full of grace. They are fathers and mothers who are making a difference, a substantial difference that may very well salvage faith, family, and freedom for future generations. John, I got a question for you.
Okay.
I read several states there. Would you say that in the United States, all the states have homeschooling groups?
There are homeschooling groups all across the United States, yes. Some states more prevalent than others. Well, we're going to hear from a fellow by the name of Kevin Swanson. He has a website which, interestingly or not, is www.kevinswanson.com. So if you'd like to, in fact, that's where you got your script there for that reading, Don, was from kevinswanson.com. Kevin Swanson is an excellent speaker, and we're going to hear at least a part of what he has to say as he spoke recently to a conference, to a statewide conference of homeschoolers at First Federated Church in Des Moines, Iowa. Here now, Kevin Swanson.
we had just running by, and my wife and I put this together shortly after this. Roadkill dissections, double the learning experience at half the cost. Your whole appendix operation kit. By numbers. Build your own nuclear reactor kit using radon strips from smoke detectors. That's been done by the way. A homeschool kid did that once and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission shut it down. We tried just 20 years ago. Character in a box. I like this one. They'll get it in a year or double your money back. They're going to go out of business pretty quick if they do that. How about this one? Full contact speech debates. From a biblical worldview, of course. The unconventional homeschool field trip guide includes fun things like paying surprise visits to your local social services offices. Okay. Homeschool curriculum we're still waiting for. I haven't seen it yet. The purpose of this presentation is to give you a vision for the future. While you are busy every day laboring about the dish in which you work, it's sometimes hard to see what you're doing and where you're going. And what I want to do is sort of lift you up so that you can see where we are headed as a movement. And I'm bringing about 40 years of experience in the homeschool experience. I was raised in a mission field in Japan. My folks raised us out there. And I think I was able to bring a little bit of vision to you. I hope by God's grace we can present some things. Somebody once said there are those who make things happen, there are those who watch things happen, and then there are those who wonder why happen. And my goal for you is that you at least understand where we've been and where we are going. That, I think, is what vision is all about. I asked my dad a couple of years ago when he was out to visit us why he went out to the mission field in Japan, homeschooled us out there. He said he wanted to preach the gospel in Japanese, but there's something else that pressed him to go to the mission field back in 1969. He said he had been teaching in American public schools in the 1950s, American private schools in the 1960s. He came to the decision in 1969 that he did not want to raise his children in this culture. So my dad took us out to an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and he created his own culture out there. We weren't raised with American culture. Not all we ever got was half the sound of music. They let us watch half of it, and then got a little too romantic and went off. And that was about all we got. And then occasionally we would get the American comics, and my grandparents would send us these presents wrapped in newspaper, and we would get the comic strips, and we would, spread them out on the floors. That was about the extent of American culture that we received. And I can remember our deputation one year, it would have been in the mid-70s. I was 11, 12 years old. We were fishing in Wheaton, Illinois, where my grandfather lived. And I had caught a big one, it was a big fish in a really little pond somewhere in Wheaton, Illinois. And I had this big thing in my hands. And I can remember distinctly some little kid, 10, 11 years old, comes by me, and this kid takes God's name in vain, right there in front of God and everybody. And I was so shocked to hear somebody take God's name in vain. I dropped my fish and it slid back in the pond. That was the sort of raising that I had out in the mission field. See, my dad was concerned about the culture. He could see there was something wrong. And my father really believed that there was a problem with the ideas and also a problem with the attitudes and the consequences he was seeing in the lives of young people in the 1960s. The ideas were corrupted at the roots. Schools were increasingly teaching and preaching evolution, which denied God as the origin, God as the source. And that concerned my father greatly. He went on and wrote one of the very first books in Japanese on the creation and evolution issue. But my father was concerned about what was happening. Now, fast forward, and you find today serious things happening everywhere. not saying you've got to take kids out to an island anywhere, but you really got to have somewhat of an island. You need to protect your children to give them an opportunity to prepare for what God has for them. Well, what I want to do is I want to go back in time and try to analyze what happened. Because if we can discover what happened, we can plan a new vision for the future, for our children and for our grandchildren. Well, one of the best ways to break down what happened is I like to include the comment Ben Franklin made when he said, either you'll be governed by God or by God you'll be governed. When he says, either you're going to be governed by internal morality, either you're going to have strong families, or you are going to see a growth in government, the tyranny that rules and controls your world. And this is precisely what we see in the modern world. As we see morality decline, as we see the family dissipate, we find that the growth of government is steady and it continues onwards. Back in the early part of the 1900s, government only took 10% of the GNI. Today, that's the gross national income. Today, governments at all levels, federal, state, and local levels, take a full 45% of the people's income. Our lives are consumed with government. Government has grown significantly, and few people complain about tyranny. Imagine what Ben Franklin would say in his book, The Way to Wealth. He says, a government that takes more than a tenth of people's income is a tyranny. God forbid it should ever happen to our country. And yet today, 45% of the people's income are taxed, and people could care less about it. Why is that? Because either you'll be governed by God or by God you'll be governed. Another way to analyze what's going on is what Francis Schaeffer puts together in his works. I recommend Francis Schaeffer's works because he was a guy back in the 60s and 70s trying to figure out what's happening in this boiling pot. The man had a thermometer and a thermometer. Not all people are able to determine what's going on. Guys, we're in the ditch. It's hard to know how life can be any different than what you've been raised with for the past 5 generations. But God, by His grace, gives a revelation to a man, Francis Schaeffer, and he spends all of his works, I don't think working much on the solutions, but certainly trying to identify the problems. What is going on in our world? Francis Schaeffer would summarize all of his works by saying this: modern man is lost and lonely. Modern man is without relationships and without truth. And I want to go back into history and I'll show you what happened. How did we lose the vision that I have been trying to present to you here over the last day or two at this conference? How did we lose a vision for relationships? How did we get the vision that professionals and bureaucrats would give us? How did we get from a world of mothers and fathers, grandfathers, pastors and friends, to a world of bureaucrats, professionals, Now let me ask you, is that something that you recognize? A formal education funded by the state where a child is removed as soon as possible from parents and adult relatives. And one reason today we continue to get this compulsory attendance law, which started in the 1820s in Prussia and moved into America in the 1840s in the Massachusetts state. And now we've got state legislatures everywhere pressing hard for more compulsory attendance. The last 2 years we've lost battles in Colorado on this one. You almost lost the battle in Iowa this year on this one. But thanks to the homeschoolers, you drew the line. You said, I'm not going to have it. Why are they so committed? Because they are living the life of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's favorite book on education comes up in the first 3 pages of his book, Emile. This is the best book ever written on education, is Plato's Republic. Now, if you know anything about Plato's Republic, you know that Plato's optimum society was a society where there were no parents living together, there were no marriages, there were temporary liaisons, and Plato says this, quote, no child should know his parent, and no parent should know his child. Now, fast forward to the 1840s, and you get a man named Karl Marx, who in the footsteps of Jean-Jacques Rousseau writes the most important and the most influential document of the modern age, the Communist Manifesto. And in this document, right smack in the center of it, he mentions you. Did you know that? You're there, you're famous. But what it says is we have got to replace home education with with the education and socialization. And he recommends public education required for all children as the solution. That was the 10th plan in his manifesto. And then he says the ultimate issue is the abolishment of the family. Karl Marx understood that if the family would exist educationally and economically for the family, then that would forever and ever be an imposition upon the power of the state. Guys, we're in a gigantic power battle. A battle between the family and the state in the modern age. See, Karl Marx wanted a total state where the individuals saw themselves in social relationship with the state or a corporation as managed by the state, having no real relational connection with the social relationships that God laid out for us in family and church. This is the battle that we have been fighting for the last 150 years. And we were losing the battle until 1969, when a father said it's not going to happen to my kids. Rousseau's orphans are everywhere today. Everywhere. The orphanage is expanding. The hearts of fathers and mothers have been severed from their children. The nuclear family today, as of 2006, makes up a minority of American households. You say, how does this happen? Rutgers University says American families are the weakest in the Western world. We have 37% of children born without fathers, up from 6% in 1960. How does this happen? It is exactly the vision of the intellectuals who laid down the institutions for the modern world. You have to understand this. The battles that you fight are not just a simple battle of one family. It is a family immersed in institutions that have been founded eternal relation. There was always one in three. There were always three persons eternally together. God created man with the capacity of relationship between him and them, and with the capacity of relationship between each other. But then when man begins to turn away from relationship, Cain kills his brother. And as he kills his brother, the first thing he does is he goes out and he builds a city. The Bible calls him a vagabond, lost and lonely. Man by nature is a vagabond. Now, let's fast forward to the 2000s. Today, do you understand that the average square footage of homes have doubled since 1900, while the number of children in the average family has been cut in half? As we were driving here today, my assistant Chad says, man, these houses built in the 1920s are small. I said, yeah, they raised 4 children in those homes. Now we're raising 2 children in homes that are twice the size. What happened? It wasn't just the Industrial Revolution, guys, that turned our hearts away. It was our hearts themselves that were drawn more to materialism, more to economics, which always a Marxist concept of what is value in life. Everything in life is reduced to the economic in the socialist construct. So what is of value to the average American? I'm not trying to condemn anybody here. God gives you different numbers of children depending on what he wants to give you. That's fine. God is sovereign, what he's saying. And God bless you for however he's blessed you. It's wonderful. My point is that people have turned away from what God says is a blessing, and they turn to other things which Karl Marx has said is a blessing. They've been more defined by a naturalistic, materialistic view of things than what God says is important. Yes, the Industrial Revolution did some things. But I'm not blaming the Industrial Revolution. I'm saying it was the hearts of men that turned away from what God says is of value and of importance and is life-giving. And our hearts have turned astray to what Karl Marx and Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Plato said was important. My challenge to you today is we've got to go back to what God says is important. Let's establish our ethics. That is our values, what is good and what is bad, and what is right and what is wrong, by the Word of God, and not by what Karl Marx and Jean-Jacques Rousseau did. God never abandoned 5 of his own children and left them orphanage. I assume God is better than Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I assume that God is wiser than Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And why is it that people have turned away from God's Word as directing what is good and what is right in life? I think it's because we have turned to our own way and we have sought the lost and lonely lifestyle. Well, I've already said that man is lonely. Now we establish how man lost himself in the modern age. Let's back all the way up to the Renaissance, because the first indication of humanism came, I mean the Renaissance in the 1300s. Michelangelo would carve out a statue of a man who was chipping himself out of the rock. You've seen it, I'm sure. Now here's the problem. For 200 to 300 years, there was an optimism among humanism to think that man could define himself, that man could ultimately, by his own mind, determine what is right, what is true. So man optimistically said it's possible. Then, by the 1800s, by the time we get to the men like David Hume, and eventually existentialists of the modern age, man came to the recognition that he could not chip himself out of the rock because he didn't have hands yet. He gave up the search for absolute truth and absolute ethics. Now, postmodern man has admitted it's all relative. Absolute truth and absolute ethics is impossible. They've abandoned even natural law. They've obviously abandoned God's law a long time ago. And now we've said it's impossible to identify our way in this snowstorm of life. They have lost all the tether and they wander everywhere. They are self-conscious in their lostness and their in 1652, the very first printer in America began with this simple statement, A, in Adam's fall, we sinned all. And you know what? That printer had displayed for 150 years. In 1777, they reprinted it and added pictures. Then by 1800, you have Thomas Jefferson laying out the idea for schools in the Washington, D.C. area. He said, you guys better use the Bible and watch hymnal. Then going to 1870, you still have enough readers. If you have said it won't be enough readers, you know that they're still talking about Columbus coming to America with a vision for the kingdom of God. And he's got whole stories on how to celebrate the Sabbath. You know the old fourth commandment, you're supposed to take one day off on the Sabbath and not work straight through. He's got a whole paragraph in the 6th grade reader on what to do on the Sabbath day. Now, by 1920, virtually all references to God had disappeared in the curriculum. This was about 3 generations ago. So this has already impacted everybody sitting here if you've been educated anywhere close to the public school system. By the 1950s, you have absolutely no references to God. You've got readers that say more friends and neighbors, friendly village, neighbors on the hill, our new friends. What is this communicating? This is communicating that your relationship is primarily to the village. Think about it. The Dick and Jane and Alice and Jerry readers, when they celebrated Christmas, you know, the Christmas tree, it was on the street. They put it on the street and had a neighborhood Christmas celebration. Why is that? Because the fundamental social good was being eroded self-consciously in the minds of people who were laying out the curriculum. The family wasn't important. Hillary's village was important. And of course, this is what's represented in Sesame Street as well. But see, we're beginning to see the family relationships are being eroded by the 1950s. Now, fast forward to the 2000s, and we're debating over whether Heather has 2 daddies should show up in separate classrooms in Washington, D.C. You see, we went all the way from A in Adam's fall, we said it all, to Heather has 2 daddies, and an Oregon school teacher was just dismissed because she happened to have a copy of the Bible in her classroom. That happened just a few weeks ago. And I was perusing materials at a charter school conference just to see where things were in the 2000s. This has been a couple of years ago. I spent 15 to 20 minutes going through all these textbooks, science, reading, math, even math. I found evolution in the math books. I found socialism, I found egalitarianism, I found pluralism, and I'll give you an example of pluralism. This little Japanese boy worships at the god shell of his departed ancestors in Japan. This is how he expresses his values. How do you express your values? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a godless curriculum. This is a pluralistic, polytheistic curriculum. It has egalitarianism in it, existentialism in it, full-bore humanism in it. Education is always religious. It is never neutral. And the modern textbooks refuse to acknowledge the one true and living God who created heaven and earth. They refuse to do it. Now, I know they're going to be monotheistic, polytheistic, and atheistic at the same time, but it ain't possible. Have you ever tried to do that all at the same time? Relativists love to do that kind of stuff, but they're incredibly unsuccessful at it. What do we have? A world that has moved away from relationships and truth. We have a world of the vagabond, lost and lonely. All of us. Why? Because we grew up. Because we inherited 8 generations of it. We have the enmity of the city. And by the way, people are increasingly moving out of small cities, out of small churches, and moving into anonymous relationships in the modern city. Much like what Cain built so many years ago. They have short-term, very transient relationships with one another. You say it's all the fault of the Industrial Revolution. We have to move for our corporate jobs constantly. No, it's the hearts of men that drive the whole thing. That's it. Men don't have long-term relationships much anymore. And of course, the most fundamental relationship of all, family, is breaking down. We have a loss of truth and love institutionally. We have no truth. For 200 years, man thought he could find truth. Now, he's given up the search. We have no real love, just bureaucratic welfare programs, orphanages, because men like John Jacques Rousseau removed the arena in which love would operate. Churches, families, communities, based on God's concept of relationship. So we've lost these things and we're wandering. Now, I want you to come back to 1969. In 1969, one man is faced with a very important verse. Deuteronomy 6:7. God's word comes to a lost and lonely age with those incredible words that are the perfect application to the age we live in today. You shall teach your children as you sit in your house. You shall teach my words, my truth, as you sit there, as you disciple your children in the womb of relationships. Truth in the womb of relationships. This is the message that I think Francis Schaeffer missed. He didn't have an application. And this is the frustration of some of his writings. We just didn't know what the solution was in the 1970s. But God's word gave us an application, a powerful application. And men and women started practicing all over the United States. Millions are practicing it. And it's a beautiful application. It is exactly what modern man has been crying out for. He is lost and lonely. God says, teach my truth in the womb of relationship. Isn't that beautiful? That's the application. That's what we need. We need to bring God back. God says, I want you to teach my truth. And I want you walking side by side with your child as you do so. I want relationships and I want truth side by side. He said, I want my truth to be as a front runner between their eyes. I don't want them to have an impression that any part of life is to be lived without the recognition that God is there. And God's truth is applicable. He says, I want it as frontlets between their eyes, on the pillars of your gates, on your posts. I want you to teach them as they're standing up, as they're walking, as they're laying down, in every possible position. I want my word permeating their life. I don't want them to get the impression they get a little God on Sunday for an hour. And then for the next 40 hours, or for the next 6 days, all they get is godlessness, where God isn't in the science lab. God doesn't show up in the history class or geography class. I want God always present in their metaphysics or in their reality. We have got to find ways to bring God back. We were on a trip out to Oregon last year, and it was in the wintertime, it was in January. We were traveling down I-80 in Wyoming at about 80 miles an hour. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and I was sleeping, not at the wheel. My wife was driving. And I wake up to her screaming, help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jesus! Now, this is not a good time. Right away, I understood there was something wrong. I opened my eyes, and we were going sideways down the freeway. I-80 at 80 miles an hour, with cars and trucks going alongside us, behind us, in front of us. It was a crazy, crazy night, and I started screaming. I prayed over her like a charismatic does. You know how we get a little chaotic? We got downright chaotic right there in the middle of that freeway. I started saying, help me, Lord! Help us! Save my life now! Because my wife wasn't doing anything. She just let go of the wheel. And God, I kid you not, God came down over that vehicle and moved that big old excursion off the freeway to the center of the line where by God's grace there was 18 inches of snow, and we just plowed snow for 100 feet and came to a stop. It was just like grabbing on a pillow. And I didn't know we were stopped. This is like an igloo, you know, and we were just covered in snow. It was amazing. We sat there for a moment in silence. I looked outside and said, honey, I think we're stopped now. Kids, you can wake up. It's all right. And we cried. We sang to God be the glory, great things he has done. And we knew that there was somebody else in the car with us. teach science that way. He's not teaching science. He's not teaching science. Don't you ever teach science without the fear of God. This is the beginning of wisdom. And when men deny that God is behind it all, and when they present science for generations without God, without the fear of God, the worship of God, our fear for science, we will destroy it. The pride of men, right now, is destroying science. In the pseudoscience of evolution, and a lot of astronomy, biology, environmentalism, the pride of men is going over constantly because they're not teaching science in fear of God. I speak as a scientist myself, an engineer, and went through so many classes where we were not on our knees worshiping God. Oh, may we return a sense of God, the fear of God, to our worship. Well, let me close with three things that will constitute the cutting-edge vision for the homeschool movement in the 21st century. Just three things here. Number one, we're bringing relationships and truth back to a lost and lonely world by bringing in higher education. I've already said that we've got truth, we've got a worldview, we've got relationships in home education. For those of you who have captured the vision, what I believe to be the homeschool.
You've been viewing a speaker, Kevin Swanson, speaking before the network of Iowa Christian home educators in Des Moines, Iowa in second week in June.
How do we do this? Well, understand the principles of a good education is the fear of God, the principle of individuality, life integration, relationships. And these are effectively a discipleship relationship between the teacher and the students. Now, these sorts of things don't exist much in the college sphere. In fact, I remember one college professor telling me, you know what, I don't want to see you all semester long. I asked him if I could have a meeting with him on a regular basis. He said, if I have things my way, I just assume to sit there and contemplate my neighbor. Now, that wasn't really a relationship. You follow me?
We'll be seeing you next week. We'll let this fellow take the last 10 seconds.